On March 12th, Larian Studios held an Ask Me Anything forum on Reddit where they spent 2 hours responding directly to comments and questions regarding details on the upcoming game Baldur's Gate 3. Let's discuss everything we learned from the AMA. If you want to stay up to date on the latest BG3 news, or you want to learn more about the lore and the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons rule set that BG3 is based on, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss anything. So first up, let's talk about everything we learned about characters and character creation. So Larian Studios did confirm that all classes and subclasses from the player handbook will be available at launch, and that you will be able to multi-class just like in 5th edition. The key part there being at launch, so not all of the classes will be available during early access. For those of you that aren't familiar with 5th edition, the player handbook core classes include the Barbarian, the Bard, the Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. I do have an entire Dungeons & Dragons Basics series that I've been working on. A couple of the videos are already up, so if you want a little bit more information on the core races and classes, I'll put a link for those up in the corner. So they also responded to a question regarding the Ranger class. Now, if you're new to 5th edition, basically the Ranger is a bit of a controversial class. It's considered by many to be the weakest class of 5th edition. A few years ago, Wizards of the Coast actually released an unofficial rule set for a revised Ranger. And I talked about all of this in my class video, and I've been very curious to see what Larian Studios was going to do with the Ranger class in Baldur's Gate. So I'm glad that someone asked the question. And they did respond saying that there will be revisions to the Ranger. Specifically, there will be changes to the favored enemy and natural explorer features. All of this was done based off playtest material provided to Larian Studios by Wizards of the Coast. They also responded to some questions regarding character creation. All the characters will be fully customizable. You'll be able to choose your starting spells, your skills, your attributes, and everything. If you do not want to do all of that customization, you have the option to play an origin character where everything will be selected for you, or you can still do a custom character where you choose your race, class, and background, and then you're ready to go. All of your skills and starting spells will already be selected. In terms of appearance of your character, it'll be similar to Divinity Original Sin 2, where you are choosing from preset face types, hairstyles, facial hair, skin color. However, they did say that there's much more diversity in creation than any other game that they've made, so you should have lots of options to choose from to customize your character's appearance. We'll be able to build custom parties in character creation, although this feature will not be available in early release. There have been a lot of concerns around custom characters because in Divinity Original Sin 2, most people felt that they needed to play an origin character in order to get a more in-depth storyline, and that by making a custom character, they were missing out on some of those special dialogue options. So this is something that Larian Studios responded to during the AMA. They mentioned that custom characters will be fully voice acted just like origin characters, and that even custom characters are going to have meaningful story arcs, much stronger connection to the world and the main story than what we saw in Divinity Original Sin 2. So they basically said whether you do an origin character or whether you do a custom character, you're not going to miss out on anything, and you'll still be able to explore and see the storyline of those origin characters by having them in your party and seeing their story that way. They also mentioned that full release is going to cover from levels 1 to 10, which I'm personally fine with. That's a standard range that you would cover in a typical 5th edition campaign. And it leaves the option for potential expansions or sequels in the future, which is great. So moving on from characters and character creation, I want to talk a little bit about this theme that I was seeing in a lot of the responses, which was that your choices matter. So they really kind of kept coming back to this in a lot of the responses that they were giving. So specifically, they mentioned that NPCs will remember your actions and your attitude, and they will react accordingly. They mentioned that there are serious consequences for your choices, and that as you move through the game, you'll discover quest lines and stories that relate directly to the character you're playing and the things that you've done. While the alignment system does not have as much emphasis as in previous games, each character does still have their own moral compass, and the decisions that you make could result in companions leaving your party or even deciding to attack you. You may play your character how you choose from an alignment perspective. You may play as a hero or a villain or anything in between, and that when the story ends, you will have determined your fate and the fate of many others. So I'm personally really excited for this part of the game. I really like that they're putting a lot of thought and effort into making sure that the world feels alive and responsive. I love that there are consequences for your actions and that the ending that you get is going to be specific to the choices you made throughout the game. I personally really love when we get these types of difficult choices and game impacting decisions. It's probably the reason why I love the Dark Souls series so much, because it has a lot of this and it has multiple endings. So yeah, that's just something that I'm pretty excited for. All right, so moving along here, we did get some more information around story and location. It was confirmed that the game will be act-based, so similar to what we saw in the Divinity series. Basically, you'll get to explore and adventure in a huge terrain, and then you'll move on to the next act where you'll travel to another huge region, and the next part of the story will take place there. One other cool thing that they did mention is that the deities of clerics and paladins and the patrons for warlocks will introduce additional dialogue options, as well as deities and patrons will have what they are calling voice sparks, which are essentially comments, reactions, or banter that are interjected throughout the storyline. They also mentioned that there will be more features available at full release regarding deities and patrons than what is available at early access, although they did not go into details as to what this meant. So regardless of what those features will be, it does sound like they're putting a lot of effort and thought into ensuring that the relationship between the character and the entity from which they derive their powers is going to play a role in the storyline for that character. They also mentioned that there will be connection to the story events of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, that there will be returning characters, and that the events of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 have led to what is now happening in Baldur's Gate 3. Now, they did not provide any details on what all this means. Presumably, they want us to experience that for ourselves when we play the game. However, most of the speculation right now is that it is, of course, related to the Ballspawn storyline and probably the Dead 3 as well. It is actually canon that Minsk and Boo are both still alive in the Dungeons & Dragons universe, so I think we're all hoping to see those two make an appearance for sure. And they did specifically confirm that we will see Volo. Leave a comment down below. What characters do you think we're going to see make an appearance, and or who is it that you want to see? So there have been a number of vocal critics stating that they think Baldur's Gate 3 is too cartoony or too lighthearted, and that it didn't have the same dark undertones of its predecessors of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. So they did take the opportunity to respond to that. They stated that at PAX you saw 1 hour of what will become a very, very long story. In other words, you've seen nothing yet. Rest assured that the story of BG3 is a dark epic rife with dark encounters and tough choices that will challenge your preconceptions about what it is to be a hero. In fact, I'd say heroic players will have a hard time staying on the righteous path, whereas fiendish players will simply have a ball. Now, if you watched my breakdown of the BG3 fact sheet video that I did a couple weeks ago, this is something that we kind of already talked about there, but again, it just highlights the fact that this is likely not going to be just another I'm the hero and I'm going to save the day type of storyline. You are going to have to make a tough choice about whether to play as that hero or embrace evil and seize that power for yourself. And with this statement, I think it just takes it a little bit further, where it sounds like the right choice is not always going to be obvious. And what you may think is going to be the heroic thing to do could in fact end up having some terrible consequences. They also gave us a little bit more information on the companions and the relationship between the player character and the companions. They mentioned that there will be party banter, so again, voice sparks and automated dialogue. We saw this in Divinity Original Sin 2. It states that the companions will react to what the party is doing and what they're not doing, and most of this dialogue and reaction will happen at the camp setting. You'll also be able to recruit mercenaries that you can customize. Mercenaries, however, will not have backstories like companions do. All right, next let's talk about everything they said about combat. So they did reiterate the fact that the action economy is generally going to follow that of 5th edition. Each character is going to get an action and a movement, and they can use a bonus action if they have one available to them, or an extra attack if it's a feature of their class. They responded to some of the concerns around the use of bonus actions. They clarified that dash and hide do in fact require a full action, while disengage and jump are a bonus action that's available to everyone. They noted that they are aware of the impact that this has to the rogue class and are, quote, looking into ways of keeping them appealing and viable. So this is one of those topics that I, on one hand, fully trust Larian to get it right. I really liked the feel and the play style of the rogue in Divinity Original Sin 2, so I do think that they know what they're doing. That said, 5th edition rogue is very near and dear to my heart. My favorite character that I've ever played in tabletop was a rogue, so yeah, I'll probably be very critical of the rogue, and I'll just be very disappointed if it's not perfect. We also got a little bit more information on how reactions will work. So originally it had sounded like attacks of opportunity were the only reaction that would be available, which brought a lot of concern because there are classes like the wizard who have very iconic spells like shield and counter spell that are kind of considered as defining features for those classes. So there were questions around how this would work in Baldur's Gate 3. So they did clarify, stating that players will have the ability to enable the reaction of their choice, and that it would then trigger automatically when the correct conditions are met. Things that they confirmed that are not currently part of combat: there is not an option to grapple, and there is not an option to ready an action. They also talked a little bit about ammunition. There will only be ammunition for special ammo, and spell components will only be present for spells that require expensive components, mainly for balancing purposes. They also addressed some of the questions and comments around the team-based initiative. They mentioned that team-based initiative was done in an effort to give a more tactical coherence and allow for more comfortable co-op experience. The initiative system is, however, something that they are still working on and experimenting with, so if they find it doesn't work as they intended, they will be making changes. It's something that they're going to be watching and tinkering with during early access. We did get a little bit more information around how the rest feature will work. So the time between combat is considered a short rest. Any class features that you would normally regain during a short rest will be refreshed during that time. Long rests do require that your party go to the camp and spend the night. There was no mention of how often you're able to long rest. There was also additional information provided around loot. As we learned during the PAX live stream, all loot is static, meaning that you get the same item each time from each location, and this does include magic items as well. So I think this is kind of nice. It takes away some of the RNG. It also means that if you're replaying the game, you know where to go to find a particular item that you want, maybe for a certain build that you're doing. They did also mention that there are overall less magic items than what we saw in Divinity Original Sin 2. Magical items that you do find will feel special, and that they're hand placed and in many cases hand created. That kind of covers most of the highlights. There were a few other miscellaneous items that they addressed, for one being the grit system. So some of the complaints that the characters were too clean looking. They did mention that they do have a grit system, but it was not ready yet. They also addressed some of the comments and criticisms around the past tense dialogue style that they've chosen. They mentioned that there are several reasons that they went with this style, citing storyline reasons. They mentioned that they experimented with a lot of styles and that they chose this one because it, quote, turned out to be an excellent way of allowing players to tell their own story and roleplay their character on a deeper level. I think it's a wonderful tool for role-playing and storytelling, and when you're playing, it's like you're narrating your own adventure, end quote. I personally don't have a big preference on the dialogue style, so I don't really have a problem with this, especially if there are story reasons as to why they chose to do it this way. And that pretty much hits the highlights. I'm personally very pleased with the amount of information that we got out of this event. There are still a few questions that I have, namely, how often are we able to long rest, and how are we going to be determining ability scores during character creation? If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps my small channel grow, and consider subscribing and turning on notifications for more Baldur's Gate 3 news and updates.